The air at Arlington National Cemetery was calm that morning. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the marble stones in shades of gold and white. Visitors stood silently behind the black rope, watching the tomb guard march with perfect precision. Every step he took was exactly 21 inches. Every turn was sharp, controlled, and filled with meaning. It was a duty that allowed no mistakes, no distractions, and certainly no emotions to show. Among the crowd that day stood a group of men wearing casual military shirts with small patches on their sleeves. They were members of Delta Force, some of the most skilled and confident soldiers in the world. They were visiting to pay respects, but also to see the tomb guard in action. These men had been through countless missions, harsh deserts, and silent jungles. To them, few things could impress anymore. Yet there was something about the silence of Arlington that humbled everyone. As the tomb guard passed them, the morning light caught a small mark on his wrist. For a moment it was hidden under his white glove, but when he turned again it became visible. It was a tattoo, simple, small, and faded by time. One of the Delta soldiers noticed it first. He raised an eyebrow, then leaned toward his teammate with a quiet grin. "Didn't know the old guard let tattoos show," he whispered, his voice full of teasing amusement. Another soldier chuckled, shaking his head. "Guess the rules have softened," he replied. The comments were not loud, but they were enough for the nearby visitors to hear. Some frowned, others pretended not to notice. The tomb guard, however, didn't move an inch. His eyes stayed locked forward, his rifle held in perfect form. It was as if the world around him didn't exist. His posture was strong, his face calm. He stood there representing every soldier who had ever given their life for his country. The ceremony continued. The relief commander walked up, inspected the weapon, and checked the uniform. Everything was flawless. The guard's movements were exact, almost mechanical, but full of quiet pride. Every motion carried history, the history of men and women who had guarded that sacred space day and night, rain or shine, for decades. As the ceremony ended and the guard continued his silent watch, the Delta Force members whispered among themselves again. "I just don't get it," one said softly. "Why tattoo something on your wrist if you know it's against the dress code?" Another shrugged. "Maybe he's just trying to look tough." None of them meant deep harm by their words, but their laughter carried a tone of arrogance. They were soldiers of action, used to chaos and danger. To them, standing still for hours seemed easy, maybe even simple. They couldn't yet understand that stillness could also be a battlefield of its own, a fight against time, fatigue, and emotion. Minutes turned into an hour, and the same tomb guard continued to march. Tourists came and went, snapping photos, whispering stories, and pointing at the discipline they witnessed. The Delta soldiers remained, their earlier amusement slowly fading into quiet observation. They began to notice something else, the way the guard's eyes never moved from his path, the way his breathing stayed steady even under the heavy sun, and the deep respect in every single step he took. Then came a moment that none of them would forget. As the guard marched by once more, a small gust of wind brushed against his uniform. His sleeve lifted just enough for the tattoo to show clearly for a few seconds. It wasn't a random design or a symbol of pride. It was a set of initials followed by a small folded flag, delicately inked, almost hidden from the world. The Delta soldiers grew quiet. They looked at each other, unsure why the sight suddenly made their chests feel heavy. The joking stopped completely. Something about that small piece of ink felt different, personal, sacred. When the ceremony ended, the guard walked away in silence, his duty done for that shift. The Delta team stayed behind, their earlier energy replaced by curiosity and a sense of guilt. One of them finally approached a nearby Arlington staff member, an older man who had served there for years. He asked quietly, "That guard? The one with the tattoo? What's the story behind it?" The staff member looked at them carefully, then spoke in a low, respectful tone. "That tattoo isn't just a design. It's for a friend, his battle buddy. They served together overseas. His friend didn't make it back. Those initials are the man he lost, and that flag represents the folded one handed to the family. He had it inked right there on his wrist so he would never forget the man who saved his life." The Delta soldiers stood in silence. None of them spoke for a long moment. The words hit harder than any bullet. The man they had laughed at was not showing off. He was honoring a brother in arms, a soldier who gave everything so others could live. They felt small. These were men who had faced fire, seen sacrifice, and carried scars of their own. But they had forgotten that pain comes in many forms. The stillness of the tomb guard, the patience, the unwavering respect, it all made sense now. His silence was not emptiness. It was filled with memory and meaning. As the group walked away, none of them laughed again. The sound of boots on stone echoed behind them, steady and precise. Every step reminded them of the weight of duty, the meaning of respect, and the quiet power of those who serve not for praise, but for purpose. That night, one of the Delta soldiers couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the guard's eyes, calm, focused, and filled with something words couldn't describe. He realized that being a soldier wasn't just about battles fought overseas, but also about the honor carried at home. The tattoo was not rebellion. It was remembrance. From that day on, they all looked at the tomb guards differently. No one in that group ever joked about them again. They understood now. Those guards weren't just performing a ceremony. They were standing watch for every lost friend, every unknown hero, and every silent story buried beneath the white stones of Arlington. After the morning ceremony, the Delta Force soldiers were still quiet, walking slowly along the tree-lined paths of Arlington National Cemetery. The mood had shifted from teasing to reflection. For the first time that day, they realized that strength did not always come from weapons or skill in battle. Sometimes it came from discipline, respect, and memory. One soldier, who had laughed the loudest earlier, kept glancing back at the tomb guard as he walked. Something about the way the man moved, how perfectly he executed each step, was sticking in his mind. The tattoo they had mocked seemed to carry weight far beyond what they had imagined. Curiosity mixed with a little unease, and finally the soldier asked the others, "Do you know the story behind his tattoo?" Most shook their heads. "I don't think it matters," one muttered. "It's just a guard doing his job." But deep down, none of them could shake the feeling that there was more to it. The group moved toward the small Arlington office where retired soldiers and staff kept the history of the cemetery. They spoke with an older man who had worked there for decades. He had seen countless tomb guards come and go, but there was something about this one that made him pause. When asked about the tattoo, he didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at each Delta soldier, letting silence sink in. Then he spoke slowly, clearly, and with great respect. "That tattoo," he said, "is for a man who didn't come home. His initials belong to a ranger who died in Afghanistan. He was a friend, a brother in arms. They served together, faced danger together, and this guard promised he would never forget him. The tattoo is a reminder, a promise that the fallen will always be remembered." The soldiers felt a chill. They had laughed without knowing, and suddenly the joke felt heavy on their hearts. This was not about rules or fashion or rebellion. It was about loyalty, sacrifice, and memory. They thought about the friends they had lost in their own missions, the men and women who had given everything and returned only in stories. One of the Delta soldiers spoke softly. "So he's standing there, all day, every day, for his friend." The older man nodded. "Exactly. Every step he takes, every turn he makes, he is honoring that memory. That is the real strength. That is the courage most people never see." The story lingered in their minds as they walked through the cemetery. Each headstone seemed to carry a story, each stone a memory of someone who had made the ultimate sacrifice. The Delta soldiers, who were used to seeing danger up close and personal, began to see it differently now. They realized that courage was not just fighting in the field, but also standing still, holding a promise, and showing respect in silence. They returned to the tomb later that day, not to make fun, but to watch and learn. The guard marched exactly the same as before, but now they saw him through different eyes. They noticed the sweat glistening on his forehead, the steady rhythm of his steps, the calm in his expression. Each movement was a sign of devotion, and each tiny detail was executed with care and precision. One of the soldiers, who had been quiet since learning the story, whispered, "I don't think I could do this. Not for hours, not for days, not for years." Another soldier added, "It's not just discipline. It's respect. It's loyalty in a way I haven't seen before." As the afternoon passed, the Delta soldiers stayed longer than expected. They watched the guard change positions with the same calm, precise ritual. Each step seemed to echo in the stillness of the cemetery, carrying more meaning with every movement. They began to understand that the small tattoo on his wrist was not a sign of rebellion or individuality. It was a sacred memory, a symbol of love, loyalty, and honor. Later, they approached him quietly. They did not mock. They did not tease. Instead, one of them said simply, "I understand now. I'm sorry for earlier." The guard gave a small, respectful nod. No words were needed beyond that. His mission was not about recognition, and respect was shown in understanding, not applause. That evening, as the Delta soldiers returned to their base, none of them spoke much. They were quiet because their minds were full. They had witnessed something powerful, something that could not be explained in tactical terms, mission reports, or medals. It was the courage of memory, the bravery of silence, and the deep, unspoken bond of soldiers who honored one another even after death. One soldier wrote in his journal that night. He described the guard's movements, the way his eyes never wavered, and the small tattoo that told a story bigger than words. He wrote about the weight of understanding, the moment when laughter turned into respect, and the realization that some battles are fought without weapons. The story of the tattoo began to spread quietly among the Delta team, not as gossip or amusement, but as a lesson. They began to see that true strength was not always in action or results, but in promises kept, in memory honored, and in silent dedication. They realized that their own missions, as dangerous and important as they were, carried echoes of the same loyalty. Every soldier had someone they had lost, someone they had promised to remember, and someone they had carried in their hearts. Over the next few weeks, the Delta Force members visited Arlington whenever they could. Each time they watched the tomb guard, their respect grew. They saw him as more than a soldier. He was a guardian of memory, a protector of honor, and a man who carried a friend's story with him every single day. One of the soldiers remarked quietly to another, "I think I finally understand. It's not the uniform, the steps, or even the rifle. It's the heart behind it." By the time the Delta soldiers left Arlington for the final time, they had changed. The mockery, the teasing, and the arrogance were replaced with humility. They understood that some acts of courage are invisible to the world, and some sacrifices are carried silently, without recognition. They had learned a lesson that would stay with them for the rest of their lives, the lesson of respect, memory, and the power of keeping a promise. As the sun set over the cemetery, the tomb guard continued his watch, unaware of the lesson he had taught those elite soldiers. His steps remained precise, his expression calm, his dedication unwavering. The small tattoo on his wrist was no longer just a mark. It had become a symbol of loyalty, courage, and the silent strength of those who serve for others. The Delta Force soldiers left Arlington that evening with a new understanding of honor. They knew that one day, they would face dangers and missions far beyond the cemetery walls, but they would carry this memory with them. The lesson that true courage is not always loud and true respect is not always spoken. Some stories are told in silence, and some heroes are recognized not with applause but with understanding. The next morning, the cemetery was quieter than usual. A soft breeze moved through the trees, carrying the faint rustle of leaves and the distant chirping of birds. The air felt heavy with respect, as if even nature recognized the solemnity of the place. The tomb guard stood at attention, his rifle held perfectly, his eyes forward, every movement executed with exact precision. He had done this countless times, but each day felt like the first, as though the weight of duty never lessened. That morning, something unusual happened. From the distant path leading to the tomb, a figure approached. A man in full uniform, crisp and decorated with medals that told stories of long years of service. It was a 4-star general, one of the highest-ranking officers in the military. He had heard of the story of the guard and the tattoo, and he wanted to witness the ceremony himself. As the general walked, the Delta Force soldiers who had been visiting before noticed him. They had returned early, drawn by curiosity and respect, wanting to see the guard in action again. The general's presence brought an unusual stillness to the atmosphere. Soldiers, tourists, and staff all instinctively understood that something significant was about to happen. The tomb guard began his ritual, taking the familiar 21 steps, pausing precisely at the end, turning sharply and marching back. His movements were flawless as always, and the sunlight glinted off his polished rifle. The Delta Force members watched silently, now fully aware of the discipline, dedication, and loyalty required to perform this duty. The general stopped just beyond the viewing rail. He removed his cap slowly, his expression solemn. No one spoke. The silence was powerful, filled with years of history, sacrifice, and honor. The general's eyes were fixed on the guard, who continued his march with the same steady precision. Then, as the guard completed his steps and returned to the starting position, the general raised his hand in a deliberate, respectful salute. It was a slow motion, a signal of the highest respect, not for rank or ceremony, but for character, dedication, and loyalty. Every person watching felt the weight of the gesture. It was not merely a salute to a soldier standing still. It was a salute to memory, to promises kept, and to the silent courage that few could understand. The Delta Force soldiers standing nearby were moved beyond words. They had joked the day before, and they had laughed at something they did not understand. Now they lowered their heads, feeling the gravity of their earlier ignorance. They realized that the tomb guard, who had silently carried the memory of a fallen friend, had earned a salute from one of the highest-ranking officers in the military. This was honor in its purest form, unspoken, unearned by words, but earned through action and loyalty. The guard, for his part, did not flinch. He did not acknowledge the general with anything other than a slight professional nod. His mission was not about recognition or praise. It was about respect, memory, and keeping the promise to a fallen friend alive. His tattoo, barely visible beneath his sleeve, had become a symbol of that unbreakable promise. After the salute, the general stepped back slightly, lowering his hand. He did not speak, but the look in his eyes conveyed more than words ever could. Respect, admiration, and a deep understanding of courage shone through. He had witnessed firsthand that true bravery often comes in silence, discipline, and dedication. The Delta Force soldiers, now fully humbled, reflected on their own lives in service. They understood that missions in the field, danger faced overseas, and enemy combatants confronted were only part of the picture. True courage also meant honoring the memory of those who had fallen, standing still when it mattered, and respecting traditions that reminded everyone of sacrifice. For the tomb guard, the morning continued as usual. He resumed his watch, eyes forward, rifle held perfectly, steps precise. But there was a quiet sense of acknowledgement in the air. He had not sought recognition, yet it had come in the form of a salute from a general, a moment that silently affirmed his devotion, loyalty, and honor. As the day progressed, the story of what had happened began to circulate quietly among the visitors and staff. People spoke in hushed tones about the Delta Force soldiers who had learned a powerful lesson in respect, about the guard who had silently carried the memory of a fallen friend, and about the general who had recognized the courage that exists in quiet, disciplined dedication. The Delta Force members lingered for a while, taking in the atmosphere, understanding that some lessons are felt rather than spoken. They watched the guard as he performed his duties, seeing not just a soldier in uniform, but a man embodying principles that transcended rank, power, and skill. Every step, every turn, and every pause held meaning. Later that day, one of the Delta soldiers quietly approached the guard again. This time there were no questions, no comments, no teasing. He simply said, "Thank you." The tomb guard acknowledged the words with a slight nod, his eyes forward, silent as always. That single exchange carried more meaning than any conversation could have. Gratitude, understanding, and respect passed between them without the need for lengthy words. By the time the sun began to set over Arlington, the cemetery was bathed in a golden light. Shadows stretched across the rows of headstones, and the air was calm once more. The tomb guard continued his watch, and the Delta Force soldiers departed, their hearts and minds forever changed by what they had witnessed. They carried with them a deeper understanding of honor, courage, and the silent sacrifices that define true military service. The general, too, left with a quiet pride. He had seen firsthand the embodiment of loyalty and dedication, and he knew that the story of the guard's tattoo would continue to inspire those who heard it. It was a lesson that would be remembered long after the soldiers had gone, a symbol of courage and honor that did not require words to be understood. That day, the tattoo, once mocked, became a symbol of strength, memory, and unwavering dedication. The salute from the general was not just an acknowledgement of the guard's service, it was a recognition of the power of promises kept, of silent courage and of respect that transcends uniforms, ranks, and personal achievements. And so, the story ended as it began, with the tomb guard standing at his post, eyes forward, steps precise, and a silent promise carried in every motion. The Delta Force soldiers left changed men. The general's salute lingered in the air, and the memory of a fallen friend lived on, not just in ink, but in the hearts of all who understood what it truly meant to serve with honor.